everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on Rapid SQL. We'll give a half a minute here to let folks log in. And you should be seeing Rapid SQL here under Help About. Current version is 17.1. And then I also have some of the community sites to talk about and show as resources. So I actually have a number of tabs set up here. So we'll introduce these helpful areas. I have a couple of slides and then maybe some administration areas. All the lines are on mute. And there is a question dialog box where you can submit questions, but we'll give an overview of the product here, and some of your questions might be answered within the scope of the presentation, but we'll receive a question and we can follow up on that as well. So maybe let the presentation unfold, and then there's ways for you to talk to us. Everyone will be sent the recording, so that's great. And then there's lots of recordings, and we'll show you where those are. And then also anyone that attended will be sent the link for the recording, or anyone that registered. So even if you had a colleague that missed it, they should be able to get a copy of this recording. Okay, so welcome everybody. Again, this is a webcast on Rapid SQL. And Rapid SQL is part of Power Studio. So if you hear Power Studio mentioned, Rapid SQL is a component of that, right? And so from the IDERA.com homepage, there's a link to Power Studio. But there's lots of content here, and so I opened up a few tabs, and actually turned out to maybe about half a dozen to 10 of them. So let's just talk about some of those. So you can drill down into the Power Studio tab here. And then you could drill down into the individual components, right? And so Rapid SQL is the cross-platform SQL query tool, development tool, or a tool for folks that have different hats or job titles, right? But if you need some of the DBA type features, that steps into DB Artisan. So there is an upgrade path, and our next webinar is on DB Artisan. So we'll focus on Rapid SQL here today. And then, here's the look and feel of Rapid SQL. So we'll introduce that, but you do have integration to some of those other components, right? So we'll talk about those. But let's maybe introduce a few more areas on the community sites. So there's links to these different components. And so here's the Rapid SQL homepage, right? And so here's some highlights that we'll use as a theme. And I have, a couple slides that I'll use as an anchor for the flow of this presentation. But you also see, there's a web browser built within Rapid SQL and the IDERA tools. And so here you can see, a list of those that ties to the website as well, right? So this is a helpful URL link page, right? How to get started, how to connect, right? So we'll show those. But, here are some highlights, tech specs. So, what platforms does Rapid support? Here's a grid list. But we'll go into the connection tree and talk about that as well, right? So just showing some different resources available at your fingertips here, just with a few clicks. One of the more helpful ones are the documentation and then some of the videos. So here, resources, you have some videos. Here's the data sheet. Tour, here's a quick tour, right? Just screenshots and what are the basic ways of getting started with Rapid SQL. So definitely check out the website, right? Helpful areas here. And then under resources, product documentation, there's an online wiki, and this is a 20-year product, right? So just a ton of helpful documentation, right? And that's from the IDERA.com homepage. So product documentation, here you can see Rapid SQL, and then you have a quick start guide and a user guide. IDERA joined with Embarcadero a few years ago. And so Rapid SQL, DB Artisan, ER Studio were from the Embarcadero side of the house. And now we're under IDERA. So that's fine, right? Oracle bought MySQL, right? Amazon owns Whole Foods, right? So you might see Embarcadero here or there, but we're under IDERA. And then IDERA.com can get you to some of these pages. Here's the quick start guide, which is a PDF, right? So this is, this is basically something you could print out, right, with screenshots and steps, tutorial sessions, right? So lots of resources if you're brand new to Rapid SQL, just by exploring the website and the user community. Okay, so if you're brand new to Rapid SQL, it's a cross-platform IDE, right? Integrated development environment for databases, right? So you have different IDEs and coding platforms, right? RAD Studio is a well-known Embarcadero coding environment. And so Rapid SQL is for database integrated development environment, where you have by IDE, an expected bundle of utilities, right? Navigation tree, easy ways of connecting, maybe a workspace in the middle, right? Tabs and pop-out windows, and then wizards and toolbars to let you move quickly or do things with visual representation and icons and wizards, right? So we'll introduce these different areas. There's different platforms, right? So you can see the core platforms, the big vendor RDBMS platforms where Rapid started, late 90s, right? And so Oracle SQL Server, DB2 Sybase, right? Now we've added SQL Azure, Postgres, MySQL, right? So we'll look at those in the next slide in the connection wizard. And then you have that bundle of features, right? So a SQL editor or a stored procedure editor, right? So being able to type queries, open up your existing queries, execute those, right? So rapidly develop SQL, right? So great name for the product, move quickly, right? Time is important, right? So giving you back time from things that take too long or bouncing between different client products, right? Adds time. So that's where Rapid can help. If you're a savvy coder, Rapid should jump out at you, right? You have the IntelliSense, pop-up windows, color coding, right? And you have different fonts and editor styles you can choose. So if you're a power coder, that's fine. Maybe you're a little newer to writing SQL. You'd like the visual query builder, right? Drag and drop tables, have Rapid write SQL for me. And then I could share that. I have a picture, right? Usually a picture is easier than text, but might be junior for some users. So that's fine, right? So you got power users, you have maybe more junior users that might use Rapid differently. Debugging, right? Traditionally a very important area, and of course still there in Rapid SQL. Where I say traditionally, right? A lot of the late 90s, early 2000s, there were homegrown applications, right? And so there still are, but now you might be working with maybe some vendor apps where you don't have the ability to step in the code the way you used to. So SQL debugging may be more helpful for homegrown apps, custom apps, and then of course still there for those core platforms. And then, integration exists. I mentioned how Rapid integrates with DB Artisan and some of the Power Studio tools. Version control has integration points in Rapid as well. So some of the big vendor version control systems, you can set up hooks to version control. And so if you have those in-house, you can have Rapid talking to those, right? So Team Foundation Server, right? Subversion, PVCS, those type of third-party version control systems Rapid can hook into. Okay, so this list gets updated, right? You can see the latest SQL Server, Oracle, and then look for some more here as well. So again, sometimes tying that to the website is the best way to check that, right? So one of these tabs here I had, the platforms, right? So sometimes there might be different functionality that's on the way, right? And so that's where some of the asterisks might exist, but we'll explore these different areas. And then what's great about Rapid is the dynamic menus, right? And so here you can see I'm connected to Postgres, and so there I can see the browse menu for, say, Postgres. If I change my platform, right, if I switch to a different existing connection I have, then the menus are what we call dynamic, and those change. And so this is where you can reveal some of the different advanced features. And then depending on the vendor platform, maybe a vendor doesn't have that, right? So some of these objects here in the SQL Server platform, they're not universal, right? So they're not in every other database platform. Okay, so again, we'll introduce the UI a little more slowly, but just the list of databases there is nice to see. And then again, here's where Rapid can help. And then there's some powerlifting if you need those outside of Rapid, right? But otherwise, graphically intuitive, right? Very rich UI, right? Improved performance and productivity, right? So save you time, right? That's productivity, give you back time in your day. And then improve accuracy, reduce errors, right? If you make a typo, you'll see it in a syntax error, right? If you want to save files and hand them off and rerun them, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time when you have a tool like Rapid. Okay, so we'll focus on Rapid here today, and then here's some other resources that we'll talk about in terms of next steps for everybody. Oh yeah, maybe just to mention. So, back here on the IDERA site, you have resources, events. This is where you can see the next webinar, and I think the next one's on DB Artisan, middle May 13th. It should be the time frame for that. So just check out the resources or events page, and that'll help. Okay, so here's the user interface, or at least the way I have Rapid set up. And so there's some flexibility there, and we'll talk about that. There's some options. One of them I might start off with in terms of where these tabs are, upper portion or lower portion. But in general, you have the database navigator as well as the explorer, right? So you have maybe some similar look and feel here in what's called the explorer and the navigator. But this explorer here within the workspace, this is more actionable, right? You can double click here, right click here, and you'll find all kinds of shortcuts and features, where this is more of a read-only trait, right? So you'll see differences there as I navigate. But otherwise, there's a web browser here within Rapid, and these are some good starting points, right? Getting started, how to connect, register. So that's what we'll dive into. But I have some tabs open, maybe, so just to level set. Of course, you have a SQL editor, right, where you can just type SQL, execute SQL. So we'll go through some examples here and the different run arrows, right? Run a single statement, run multiple statements. And then how do I want to see my results in a single list or multiple result tabs? So those are some options we'll explore, right? So we'll talk about connecting and then just executing SQL. And of course, there's different menus for these, but there's your iSQL, your interactive SQL editor, right? So these are menus and icons that I'm displaying now, but we'll go through this a little more slowly. And then the visual query builder, right? Maybe if you're not as savvy at writing SQL, this would be more helpful for you, right? And have Rapid write the SQL for you. I can drag and drop tables, right? So we'll use this as a theme here. So we'll talk about connecting and then just typing a SQL, opening a SQL, or maybe drag and dropping tables to build that, right? Then for maybe the more code savvy user, of course, you have procedures, and then here's the little bug icon, debug icon, right? And so this would allow you to step into code, set breakpoints and watches. And so, that might be a little more advanced for some users, but under the tools menu, right? Code Analyst, code generation, there's advanced stored procedure, function, code utilities throughout Rapid SQL, right? And so, DML statements or data manipulation, right? Select, insert, update, deletes. Then you have procedure code or functions, right, or packages, which are combinations of SQL within stored code that sits on the database. So you make calls to that, right? So your create or replace, right? Okay, so advanced coding features we'll talk about. Here's the Code Analyst, where you can compare runtimes and do code summaries, right? So these are some advanced features. Again, everything's documented, so if this is a little new to you, that's fine. And then you have export wizards, right, where you can export SQL in different ways, right? So from any result set, I could right click here and save to, say, a text file or create insert statements, right? Things like that. Then we also have advanced features like the execution plan, right? So we'll look at those. And then, depending on how much time we have different other areas that we can look at, right? So let me just pause here, kind of regroup a little bit. Here's the starting point, which would be, say, registering a data source. And so here you can see a number of environments I have set up already. But otherwise, if I right click here, register, or under file, data source rather, register, and then there's the icon with the little database next to it. So once you connect once, you have these other options, register like and clone, right? So if I just right click on a connection, you can see unregister, register like, edit, right? So edit would just go into the properties for that data source, create new, and it jumps right to database properties, create new, starts here with this database type connection, right? So let's start there, right? So data source, register data source. Here's the platforms supported by Rapid, right? So depending on this vendor, we have different versions, right? So you can see all the variations of SQL Server, right, from 2008 all the way up to 2019, right? And so that's what's great about Rapid. It's intelligent enough to know after you connect and provide those credentials. So if I chose to step through this wizard, these would vary, right? So for the DB2 platform, you can see host, port, database, data source name, right? If I was to choose, say, SQL Server, maybe a little bit similar. Oracle, you start to see some differences there, right? So SID, your Oracle SID, that's a specific Oracle term, right? So instance in Oracle versus, say, schemas in DB2 and Oracle, maybe used a little differently in say SQL Server or Postgres, right? So depending on the platform, try to make this easy for you. And then you have the test connection, and then as I mentioned, the register like, right? So once you have a connection, you could say clone that, right? Register like, and then it would create a duplication of that, and then again just provide your credentials here, and it'll have that for you. Okay, so I think that should be a good starting point in terms of how you connect, but then of course you have some options, right? So here's a folder. So maybe I want to create a folder and just call that SQL Server, right? Or call this, my databases, and then either clone or duplicate and have that set up for yourself, right? And so that's an option or flexibility. But then, there's another area I always like to point out here in terms of the look and feel of Rapid, and that's this yellow drop-down arrow. And so, in the SQL Server world, we use the term databases a lot, right? And so SQL Server has an instance and then many databases, right? But say for DB2, you have an Oracle, you have your instance and then schemas. And so, you might want to navigate this tree a little differently depending on what your platform is, right? And so here, maybe in more of a SQL Server world, I have my databases drilled down, right? And then here in say DB2, I have my schemas drilled down, drill into my schemas. Here are all my object types, right? And so similar look and feel here with the Explorer view, right? So I could drive from either one of these. What's nice is in the Explorer view is you have the double click functionality. So I'll dock that navigator window and just drive here. But here's what I'm mentioning, right? So here in DB2, drill into schemas, see all my schemas, drill into my schema, see all my object types, right? So for SQL Server, though, I drill into my, say, SQL Server database, then I have schemas, then here's my DBO schema, and then there are my object types. Maybe that's not as familiar to me in the SQL Server world. So in SQL Server world, maybe I want to organize by object type, right, versus owner. So this will switch. If I switch to object type, this might be a little more familiar in the SQL Server world, right? So I drill into databases. Here are my databases, expand databases, boom, there are all my objects, right? So you have flexibility depending on what world view you like, and maybe less clicks in the navigation. But then you can highlight, and then from here, keep drilling down, right? So here's this SQL Server database and all my object types. Highlight an object grouping, and then that populates here on the sub drill down or the pop out. So if I expand my navigator window again, just to level set where we are, here's my navigation on the left, and now I'm just working in a tab here within my Explorer view in the workspace area, right? So hopefully that clarifies some of the differences there in terms of the navigation tree choices. And then this is the database navigator on the left-hand side. And then here I have my Explorer view in the workspace area. Okay, so this is a quite extensive list of objects for my SQL Server world. Depending on what platform, that might vary, right? And so here, maybe just to show MySQL, which obviously doesn't have as many objects as SQL Server, right? So if here, for MySQL, function keys, indexes, tables, unique keys, users, right? SQL Server, quite an extensive list, right? And then these are actionable, right? So I could right click either from here and take action. So there's on a table, create, or right click here in the tree, and then you have, maybe a more extensive list of, actions you can perform. So if you're more developer centric, create or alter, right? So create would just open up an object editor there. Open or alter would allow you to update code, maybe make changes, or you can just double click on this object and then that opens up a bit of an object browser, right? And so basically what we're showing here is right click throughout Rapid, that's a theme, or in the Explorer view here, double click, right? So here I have this stockbroker database where I have some test tables, right? So the broker table, client transaction. If I just double click on this table, then that opens up a new tab here for me. And now there's a lot going on, right? So I can maybe just pause here and, there's a lot that just opened up here, right? So this tab opened up with the properties for this object, right? So it's just an Explorer view. And so now I have, these level of details on the object. But then here's all my, universal, create new table, extract DDL, generate a report, right? So it's almost nice just to see what happens when you click on areas in Rapid and then, mouse over, see what you can find, right? So just at a basic level, here's obviously the structure for this table. But if I wanted to quickly go to the data, boom, here's the data tab. So, very quickly, you can just double click on a table, get to the data, right? And then you want to extract this, save as, let me save this, right? And extract this or share this with somebody else in all kinds of formats, right? So again, probably a range of goals here with today's presentation. This is very junior, that's fine. We'll keep moving here, but if this is new to you, great. Look at all these options for just saving existing data, right? So if I just need to see my broker data and quickly share that in a report, just right click save as, okay? All right, so, we'll come back to maybe some other areas in the Explorer, but maybe just start with, say, typing a SQL statement, that might be something helpful for some of us to see. So let's maybe just back up a little bit here. We can just maybe open up a SQL editor and start typing some SQL here, right? So here's an example of a iSQL editor, right, that I opened. And so here I could just click on File, New, iSQL Editor, or Open an existing, right? And then here I type some SQL statements. So why don't I just start typing those again, right? So if I just open up a SQL editor or an iSQL editor, of course you have the color coding. I can just start typing queries. Now here's an editor tied to this connection, right? So it does know to some degree where I'm connected, right? And so depending on the objects or your ability to type and know your own SQL syntax, you can type a single statement, execute that, run that with the execution arrow, and bring back a results set, right? So there I just typed a SQL statement, and then the results tab was populated, right? So pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And then we can explore here maybe some other options in terms of writing multiple SQL, executing multiple result sets, and then some different settings as well. So here's the settings icons, and so you'll see launching points for that in different areas within the tool. But also from the tools menu, you have the options, and there's that same icon. And so a couple of options I wanted to just start at the beginning that might influence what we're looking at. But let me just close down some of these tabs so that we don't have too much confusion going on here. Sometimes, it's fun opening up different tabs in Rapid, but then showing other users, you might lose track of things. Okay, so there I just execute a SQL statement. There's the results tab, right? So now let me add another SQL statement, right? So I'll just type in another SQL statement, or again, you could be cutting and pasting, right? And so, different examples here, maybe just to show you what I'm querying against, right? So here's a navigation tree, right? So here, if I expand these, here's some tables that I'm querying, right? So I just query that products table, right? Maybe I'll query my say regions next, just to get a simple result set, right? This is just a few rows. Okay, so now I typed in another statement, again, just querying some of these tables. Click on run, and now, oops. Okay, so now here I have multiple result sets, right? And so you can execute one or multiple, and then, oops, something doesn't like here. Oh, see a little typo. So there, notice I'm not calling that table name properly, right? So there's an example of Rapid doing a syntax check and catching that for you. But this is what I wanted to show. So here I just executed both these queries, and now here's results. But if I scroll down, there's the second result set, right? So you may or may not want that, and so that's where there's an option to change that, right? So if I go right into the options, it takes you directly to that page, and this is the default setting, is single window versus multiple windows. So if I change this to multiple windows, right? Now rerun this query, right? So single run arrow will run them all, and now notice multiple result tabs. Okay, so quick user setting, but maybe an important one, right? And you'll see the options icon where it makes sense, where Rapid knows that might be a preference to change. There's the options icon. Okay, and so we can give some other examples of this, right? Maybe I'll add another one just to show executing what you highlight, right? So you can have different code highlighted, and then just highlight those, right? So here, or just execute those. So here's just run the statement that you're on, right? And then you have the execute multiple, right? So you have some options there. And then another setting that is fun or maybe helpful is just saving your SQL, right? And so again, in the options, here's just options at a high level. And so logging, here's a way for Rapid to save your SQL statements to a file, right? And so that can be helpful. You can have a truncate, but if you want a history of SQL, that's a good one. There's also some ad hoc features like log the Rapid transactions, and then you can open that as well. So, okay, so some different options there in terms of running one or multiple statements, and then you have the different results tabs, and then here results tab, save as or generate statements, right? So pretty straightforward. But of course, if you have more complex SQL, that's supported, right? So maybe I'll open up a SQL statement, right? Or if you have, store procedure code, you can dig out SQL from there. But maybe just to show opening a complex SQL statement, right? So file, new, iSQL, interactive SQL, and then just yellow folder, open. So here's maybe a more complex SQL, right? Let me go into some of my demo content here, or let's see here. Here's a complex client broker SQL that I have that's interesting to look at, show. So here's just a hand holding Rapid saying, okay, are we opening this in the right way? Is this a general file? Is this a certain file? And then remember this for you. So you can turn off some of these hand holding features once you're familiar, but that's nice. It's nice about using Rapid in different environments, right? So here's a more complex SQL statement. I'll click on the blue run arrow here. Boom, get back my result set. So we just looked at that in some different ways. But then, here's the execution plan icon, right? And so if you're responsible for improving SQL or looking at what the database is doing behind the scenes there, let me turn on the explain plan. Now I'll run this SQL, and then, wow, what am I showing here? So again, here's the query, here's the results. Now I have the query plan. I can make this look a little more pretty if I right click here, view as a tree, right? So this is a great feature that Aqua has in all those supported, Rapid has in all those supported platforms. So this is pretty common. If you know IDERA, there's different tools that offer this, right? And so, our diagnostic tools in the SQL Server platform, our cross-platform tools, you'll find explain plan in lots of ways, which is helpful. If you're new to execution plan, that's fine. Google Maps is an easy way to think of this, right? If you're going from point A to point B, there's choices, right? You want to take the highways or the scenic route. It's kind of like the explain plan, right? What path is the database going to take to execute this statement? And how can I improve this to optimize performance, right? Or reduce database resources, right? Okay, so maybe just keep an eye on the clock. We're just going through, connecting, and then I started typing some SQL. I opened some SQL that I had saved. Maybe let's jump to, if you're brand new to writing SQL, the query builder might be a good starting point, right? And so, there's different ways here. I've been in this SQL Server environment. We could show those. Maybe I'll switch over to MySQL. I have my world schema there, and so maybe that's an easy example just to show how easy the query builder can be in say a MySQL environment. Okay, so you can choose your connection in different ways. You can drive from the different tabs, but if I drive from the Tools menu Query Builder, that would open up a new Query Builder window. If I navigate from the Explorer tree, right? So maybe here's this MySQL database. Here's my Scala, right? Which is kind of default. Here's my world database, right? And so you can drill into objects here, right? Right click here on your objects in different ways. And so here you can see build query, right? And so that would allow you to drag and drop tables, open up the query builder in a right click menu, right? So you have flexibility, as you become familiar, you can choose different ways. But here, if I say Tools menu, Query Builder, this opens up the drag and drop white space where I can bring over tables and let Rapid build the SQL for me, right? And so, here's say in a MySQL environment. Here, if I wanted to say maybe just do this side by side in a SQL Server environment, you can do that as well. So maybe just to show a couple of query builders, right? So here's two different query builder tabs, one in MySQL, one in SQL Server, right? Okay, so we were executing some code in some simple ways, right? So here were some queries I was working on earlier, right? And so maybe I just wanted to drag a table over, right? And then select fields this way, right? So here I could bring over a table, select individual fields, and Rapid's writing that for me, right? Green run arrow runs that, brings back my result set. And now I could take action on this data set, right? So depending on the SQL, the queries, right? You could bring in one table, multiple tables. You can even multi-select, right? So if I go back to my tables view here, you can drag multiple tables or single click or double click. And then when you have referential integrity, you'll see that as well, right? So you can say uncheck all, check all, select all in different ways, right? Or you can just multi-select, drag multiple tables over, right? And then you might have some mapping, but if you see the referential integrity, right, then you can start selecting fields that way, right? Or you can create the relationship, right, by connecting columns of the same data type, right? So here you can see the country code constraint between these tables, right? So I can include another table or another field or create a join between a table that doesn't have an existing referential integrity, right? So you have flexibility there. And then of course this is savable, right, in different ways. And so you could save this as a Rapid file, right? Or you could just get to the SQL, or you can get to the result set, right? And so depending on your goals or requirements, right? So from here, file, save as would save this whole window, right? And so there you see EQB for query builder file, right? Otherwise, if you want to get to the data set, then you can run that query, and then there's different ways of saving the data set, right? So you have the options of saving this whole file or just getting to the SQL query. Okay, so these are, say, reusable artifacts, and then the projects in Rapid is probably a helpful way to organize those, right? So projects are, again, a feature that's available for you, right? And so you'll see project as a main menu, right? So subfolder, add files, add objects. There's version control integration, check in and out. Again, if you're talking to third-party version control systems, So new project, right? So new project would, you know, be a wizard that steps you through creating those, and then you'd have that as a tab, right? And so, you know, different ways that you might benefit from a lot of these, you know, utilities and wizards that are, you know, proven technology in Rapid over the years. Okay, so let's maybe keep moving here, keep an eye on the clock. If I go back to my Explorer view, again, here's say a SQL Server environment. You know, maybe I'd like to look at some stored code a little bit more closely, right? So here you see procedures, functions, right? So here, maybe if I choose procedures, I can see all my procedures in this environment, right? And then again, if I double clicked on this procedure, that would open up the properties. And then here you have, you know, those type of icons available. So create on the procedure tab would allow you to create a procedure. And then, you know, these are some settings that you can have saved and maybe some templates for you, right? And then maybe back in that Explorer view, here, if I right-clicked on this stored code, debug is an option, right? And so that's where you can step through line by line and see the results as you step through code. So it might be a little more advanced, might be a little more coding centric, but notice that opens up in a new tab for you, DDL Editor. And now here's where I could input parameters. I could open and save parameters to save some time. You can just type here manually, right? And then this would allow you to step through. You have some debug settings for breakpoints and watches, right? So it might be, you know, for the more advanced user, but that's, you know, that's familiar and maybe expected with a tool like Aqua and a very deep IDE. Other tools have object browsing and you know, wizards, but you know, debugging and graphical code generation, you know, those are some areas that's really in the wheelhouse of Rapid and other IDERA tools. So so some of those are maybe again a little more code centric. Code Analyst, right? So I had that open where you can point to different code and then, you know, see run details, comparison details, unit summary, right? So these are some advanced, say PL SQL in the Oracle world, or stored procedure, or T SQL in the SQL Server world, right? So might be a little advanced, but well documented, and these are areas we can help with if you have interest, or you know, some power users that are, you know, familiar with these areas. Another neat one was maybe generating code, right? So here's right click, right, extract DDL, right? So here's code generation, right? So code generation facility. This would allow you to point to, say, a table and then build this procedure code around that, right? So here's this broker table again. And so I can say, okay, here, you know, maybe give this a name, or, you know, choose my fields, right? And then say, okay, here. So look, you know, this opens up into a create procedure for me. And then there's the select, right? So that's, you know, should be a wow factor, a light bulb effect for some of you. But if, you know, if not, that's fine. You know, that's where Rapid can help different users in different ways, right? So you have some of these advanced coding features, and then you have some more junior ones, right? So the visual query builder, drag and drop tables, or if you just hang out in the iSQL editor, DDL editor, you know, those are ways of using Rapid, you know, in the most efficient way, right? So, you know, some of these areas might need some setup, right? So version control, we talked to some version control systems, debugging, you know, if you've never debugged it before, maybe step through some of the wizards, and those will be helpful for you. And then now let's maybe look at some of the ad hoc areas, right? And so, you know, here I was, again, just clicking around in different ways, but maybe just to back up, right? So here, you know, here's under browse, right? So if I'm in SQL Server, browse, I just want to see all my tables, boom, this will open up for you. And then you can, you know, double click from here, right? So just browsing might be the quickest way to get to certain areas. But now notice if I switch my database, right? So here's SQL Server. If I switch that over to MySQL, you know, it stays on that tab for you, right? So now notice here, browse my objects and say MySQL, right? Or if I wanted to switch to, say, Postgres, right? And so now here's all my objects in Postgres, right? So, different ways that we're showing getting to the same area, whether it's the browse main menu or right clicking, right? Tools menu has some other neat things, right? Side-by-side code diff, right? So visual diff. So there's query builder, here's visual diff, right? So just a side-by-side, if you have, say, two scripts or, some two objects you'd like to compare. So here's just, say, a file compare. Let me see here, some different ways. Maybe I'll just do like a side-by-side, or even some complex SQL or some, say, less complex SQL, right? So maybe here's one, right? So here's a complex SQL on the left side. Maybe I'll compare that to, say, some Oracle code on the right side, right? We'll see, just side by side what's different between the two. So this, this could be objects, right? So database object. This would allow me to just say navigate the tree, right? So maybe here, maybe I have some different objects in some different environments, right? Yeah. So here's this maybe list of tables, or here maybe I'll just choose two tables that are in the same environment but might be different, right? So here's my broker table in one environment. Here's maybe my client table in another environment. What's different? Go line by line, jump forward, jump back, right? So kind of a neat utility. You can have that saved. There's also searching features, right? So you can search code in different ways. Code workbench, right? So code workbench, these are areas that you can find and replace. Here's your templates. So it's advanced coding areas. Oh yeah, I mentioned the options here, right? I jumped to this option with the tabs. The other one that's maybe high level, right? Just right at the top, just general, is where do you want the tabs, right? Top or bottom here, right? So here I'm just used to this kind of interface with those at the top, but maybe that's one of the early starting points. So if this is the look and feel for my Rapid SQL, here you see the tabs at the top. Here I can go tools, options. You know what? I'm more comfortable with the tabs on the lower portion of my screen. Just say okay, and I'll flip-flop that for you. So notice all the tabs now here on the lower portion of my screen, right? Okay, so other helpful areas, I could shut down Rapid and it will, it'll save these for me. It'll prompt me, did you want to save? So, those kind of don't shoot yourself in the foot type features are great, right? Where it can save things for you. And then remember your settings, right? So maybe just for my own sanity here, I'll switch back to the MDI on the top portion. But then, this is an area to explore. You have many options that you might be interested in, right? So just view options, here's general. And then if you expand that, you can see, lots of options per platform. DDL extract, right? So you see that in different variations. Here are your editor choices, right? So depending on the platform, you might have different ways that you prefer. And then auto connecting, right? So explore these options. There's documentation on those. And then, depending on if you're more of a coach for other users, maybe you'll have a set of templates that, or standard settings that you want your team to have, and, maybe create best practices for how to use Rapid, right? Okay, and then, you do have other areas that maybe might be more powerlifting. Reporting sometimes is of interest for certain users. Database search, finding files. So, these are ways that might be helpful, right? So database search, you can, just maybe search for a keyword or a table, right? So maybe, again, I'm using that global investment, right? This global investment database here. So if I just say choose, and I want to say search for something, I could just, type in a keyword, right? So search for tables, views, right? So just click next, give a keyword, right? Maybe I'll just search for my client tables, for example. And then this wizard would finish and do a catalog search, show you any, so show you any time that field is called. So here in this table, in this example, it was a client table, but then also showed any other tables with that, and then even structure, right? Like column level that matched that string. Okay. So just, search, right? Scripting. There's DB Artisan. So again, our next webcast will introduce that integration where you have some of the DBA monitoring, some heavy lifting, current session information, right? But same look and feel. So that's what's great about DB Artisan and Rapid. The similar look and feel. So toolbars, I've been hiding and unhiding toolbars. Maybe that's something you'd like to explore, where some of these are tiny, these icons, right? So either I drive from the main menu, or maybe you have preferences, right? So here's, for example, the tools menu, right? So if I could uncheck that if I didn't want to have that, have maybe more real estate available, or just right click, there's the tools menu. But then notice, all those icons, they're tied to the same icons here, right? So once you figure out, what you like to use and where it is, maybe customize things, right? And then you can move these around, right? So here's my toolbar menu. So maybe I want a little lower, right? Maybe version control I do or don't use. So I could check that or uncheck that, right? So take a few minutes, right? Make Rapid look the way you'd like. Give yourself more or less real estate, right? So those are areas you might expect. Projects I mentioned, and then workspaces, right? So you have maybe similarities there. Workspaces, how you have the tabs arranged, and so projects are the shortcuts here to different code areas. So again, the goal is to give you back time in your day, right? Less clicks means more productivity. And then, catching errors, catching typos, those are the type of things that, you'd find helpful, of course, in a tool like this. All right, so maybe a couple of administration areas before we finish up. We're on 17.1, right? 17.1.1, and then we're already wrapping up the code for version 18. So, Rapid is a widely licensed product for those platforms that we mentioned, and we have obviously a good relationship with many different companies, IT departments, right, that know IDERA, that know us as a helpful vendor. And so some things have evolved that maybe would be involved with your upgrade path or who you talk to at your company, right? So under help about, there are some links about your licensing and things like that. But for existing customers, we now have something called myidera.com, right? So again, I'm not exactly a customer, so I don't have this login to show you, but for existing customers, this is where you can talk to us. There's other areas like the forums for, just looking up questions. And then again, maybe some of you knew this in the legacy Embarcadero look and feel. So if myidera.com is new to some of you, that's fine. And then this is where you might want to point some folks to, the upgrade path. This is how they grab the latest new version of, say, 18 when that comes out, or if you're a little behind on 17.1. So maybe look for some more information there, or there's ways of talking to us. And this is an exciting time to be working with IDERA. A lot of momentum here in the first half of 2021, and really helpful time with tools like this that allow people to work in flexible ways. Many people working remotely. Many people might need to work in multiple places, and it's nice to have a vendor like IDERA with flexibility in terms of licensing and where you can use tools like this. Okay, so let me pause here, and hopefully we're doing okay with audio and questions. And again, if anybody has questions, you can submit them in the dialog box. I think you'll be sent just a summary or thanks for joining, so you can reply to that as ways to talk to us. And then, keep in touch, right? Stay on top of the webinar series, and then, look for these to be posted, right? So just under resources, events, there's a YouTube channel for IDERA, and then resources, this is where we'll post recordings like this as well. So Okay, so thanks everybody for joining. Good luck with Rapid SQL, and then just to remember, you might have some economies of scale where Rapid SQL is also part of something called Power Studio, and then there's some other bolt-ons there. You have a SQL optimization component, and then a change manager component, and those are the next couple of webinars also. So DB Artisan, DB Optimizer, and Change Manager are all coming up in the next month or two, and so we look forward to hearing from you and you joining those webinars. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day.